Now, if you spend time online, you'll probably remember most of these. Of that, I am sure. And if your own clip doesn't feature among the most watched videos of 2013, let's give you a helping hand.
All right, 2 clean, delicious Oreos.
You're gonna press the button wherever it goes. That's where you're going.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah.
We knocked on Google South Africa's door to get some tips on how to make online offerings more competitive, more interesting, and more entertaining. Useful information for brands playing in this important space.
YouTube is one of our fastest growing properties, not just in South Africa, but globally. In fact, there were 6 billion hours worth of video watched on YouTube every month last year globally, which is an incredible number. And in South Africa, YouTube grew by 80% in terms of the number of people watching videos, and it grew by 30% in terms of the number of people who uploaded videos. So both watchers and people who are actually making a contribution are growing very, very fast in South Africa. South Africa had a hugely creative year last year. Really impressed with the number of ads that we saw. In the top 5 most watched ads in South Africa, in fact, a huge number were actually South African ads. So if you think about, for instance, Klein Kimmy, quite a long video actually, strangely enough, but also one of the most watched.
I'm here in the daytime, so this is my day job. But the reality is that I'm a rapper. Of iron, medium, glass and helium. Kimmy in the cut, creamy cream puff, tiny Kimmy. Because I'm not big, I'm little.
If you think also about VW and Polo, with the ad around the answer being 11, absolutely fantastic work.
Robert! 11.
And all of those ads were some of the most watched in South Africa last year. You have to understand your audience, and it always helps. One of the common themes through all of those is, of course, a bit of humor, which I think it really helps the audience relate to the content. I'm a particular fan of the Mercedes one that was released, I think, in September last year, which is basically a skateboarder going down a pass next to the Mercedes. Fantastic, high quality production values, something that you'd be happy to see not just on YouTube, but on any cinema screen around the world. And it just goes to show how competitive I think South African ad makers can be. Well, in the international sphere, there were quite a few that were very, very interesting. South Africans in particular really connected with the Dove Real Beauty campaign. And I think it's one of the few that actually didn't use humor as their hook. It was, I suppose, more of a kind of a reality TV show in a sense, but something that told some people something real with a real positive message, and that people really connected with that. The wonderful thing about YouTube is it does put you in contact with a global audience. So when you do have something that actually connects, people share it. And it's not just a South African phenomenon then, but it can be a global phenomenon. And if you think, for instance, about the Beacon All Sorts ad that Kona and Twaki were the stars of.
What an incredible discovery! I shall call it the Blue Soren Darius.
That ad got something like 948,000 views, almost 1 million views. Now, I'm quite certain that a number of those views happened outside of South Africa's borders, simply because of the humor value and perhaps because of the brand as well. So it's quite possible to reach out beyond South Africa's borders with great content, good humor, and a good ad.
I shall call him Maximus! Maximilian Augustus III. Hey, Cornet, what do you call this shape? I've got it. It's a...
All right, here's an interesting question facing marketers. How is advertising strategy being forced to change its game in the digital age? Well, now Makhele, head of planning at Ogilvy Mather Johannesburg, has been promoted to the role of Group Strategy Director. And in her new role, I'm told, is going to continue to drive the agency's Twin Peaks effectiveness philosophy. Let's meet this high-flying ad person. Welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. Before we get to all of that, what does a strategic director actually do for the uninitiated?
Well, strategists generally, a strategic planning director is, at best, a good strategist. So strategists generally actually represent consumers in advertising. Our consumers right now in the digital world have power. They have their apps, they have their mobile phones, they have their internet, they have access to all these resources, but they're still human beings. So how are they well represented in the crafting of communications? And that's what a strategist does.
That's interesting. So an advocate for the consumer, often within the creative department that might have a different idea. You've got to stand up for the consumer and say, great idea, but that might not necessarily work.
Yeah.
Often a line of tension there.
It's an amazing line of tension. I mean, I think it works better if there's a heat,
Yeah.
you know, in the relationship between creative and strategy. When we represent both the brand and the consumer, we need to understand the consumer as a complete human being. I think the biggest mistake we often do is we look at them as a target audience or a target individual. When you think about it as a human being, you want to actually engage as an accomplice to the brand communications. It becomes more fun.
Such a good point. I'm not a unit in a demographic. I'm a human being. Digital, I'm glad you mentioned that. How have you had to up your game? How have you had to change the way in which you operate as a strategist in this age of digital communication?
You know, the more things change, the more things stay the same. John Steele actually said something quite profound, and I might just use that. That whether it be analog or digital, we still have to understand the human condition. We still have to understand the cultural context that brands live in, the environment that they live in, and communicate to consumers as willing accomplices, you know, as willing individuals instead of target audiences, as I mentioned earlier on. And we do that by equipping ourselves. What digital does do is that it gives us a whole lot more scales. You know, scale. We have a whole lot more platforms to engage consumers in, to connect with. We have equipped ourselves to learn a lot more about the impact of digital on our communications. We talk about becoming T-shaped planners. Really, we are generalists, but we have an understanding of specialist competencies, or what we at Ogilvy call integrated planning. So all our senior planners actually have become integrated planning leads or directors.
Now, how does all of this fit into this Twin Peaks philosophy that your agency espouses?
A planner has to do two key jobs. One of them is to inspire creative and fight for the best creative that really produces great results. And that's the planner's job. You know, when the creative is selling that idea, we should be on that journey saying, this is an amazing idea, helping sharpen the idea, but also making sure that we provide them with the right insight. So that's creative excellence. We have a pursuit of creative excellence. And effectiveness. We need to prove to our clients in this pressured market that actually great work delivers great results, because marketers are under pressure. The bottom line, as it gets tightened, marketing budgets actually also get tightened, and they need to justify that actually the investment that they make returns, gives a return on investment.
I would suggest to you that there's no such a thing these days as a long-term advertising strategy, that the timeline, the horizon has narrowed. Can brands really plan 6 months, a year in advance?
Strategy is about identifying problems and finding solutions. Whether it's short-term, long-term, it's quite interesting. Old Spice, old brand, they reposition frequently. They always have been about masculinity. They reshaped or recontextualized what masculinity was for grandfathers, and suddenly metrosexuals, and now the real man. So strategy really is about the right solutions for the problem you've identified.
It's a very good answer. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, Makhele, Group Strategy Director at Ogilvy Mather, South Africa. By the way, that's it from Mags on Media this week. Remember, you can tweet us, you can Facebook us, you can call us, you can mail us with your comments and suggestions. Carrier pigeons are not recommended. Until next week, goodbye and thank you for watching.
Moves, enca.com.